Hey, Mike, we're live, and it's been a long time since we live. I was out on PTO, and you had some recovery from a medical
Hmm.
procedure, and I logged. So we use StreamYard. It's a live streaming platform for this, and I
Yeah.
logged in obviously for the first time in a little more than a week today. And guess what you can do now?
What?
You for your entire live performance or
Yeah.
presentation or whatever this is, you can play background music. So
No,
if you
no
know,
way.
so if you know any bands, you let me know.
I have some ideas right off the bat. I actually have some ideas.
Oh, you do, huh?
Yeah. Haven't you
Okay.
ever heard of our song Government Drone about being surveilled by the NSA? It'd be perfect.
Oh, I've been watching Stranger Things, so I was humming Metallica, but whatever.
Okay.
Hey, so while we were gone, anything happened in cyber or everything all quiet?
Um, More has happened than we're going to be able to cover in 15 minutes for
Oh,
sure.
good.
Right. But first announcements. Today is free security awareness training. I know at least one small company that's sending their entire staff, and I've seen a large company where it looked like, I don't know, a dozen people signed up for the blast. They're probably going to be coming today as well. Hopefully, I'll have the deck updated with some current things that are happening in YouTube comments that I saw recently. Seems to be an epidemic there.
That sounds sinister. I don't know. Anyway, today, noon Pacific, 3 o'clock Eastern, free security awareness training. If you go to our website, criticalinsight.com, you click on events, you can sign up for security awareness training. Mike conducts it. I keep him on track. We promise it's not boring. Also, there are two events
Just
that are worth
occurred.
talking about. Yeah, that just occurred. One yesterday with the American Hospital Association, talked about how rural hospitals can improve security maturity with constrained budgets. Mike, that was a good one.
Yeah, I thought it was good. The other one was just a contracting company called Provista, but I thought that was interesting as well because we talked about how to what you should be doing if you're doing it right, if you're doing security right, and ticking off all the boxes. We're going to do another one later on compliance versus security, but I
Hmm.
did think that the American Hospital Association one was good because we were talking about how rural health organizations in particular can mature their security programs on low budgets.
Yeah, and the American Hospital Association hosted that one, so there will
Hmm.
be a link. It's from them. You might be able to get to it on their website, but we'll post a link to it on our LinkedIn page
Hmm.
pretty soon here. And anyway, let's jump into news. Since it's been a while, what's top of mind?
Big things. One of the biggest is nearly 2 million patient records. I think it was 1.9 million patient records stolen, and I mean full patient records from this professional finance company. That's what it's called,
Hmm.
PFC. And if you remember, way back when Blackbaud was compromised, and they had health records stolen that affected all of their customers. Right, Blackbaud was this basically a finance company for health sector clinics, philanthropies, nonprofits, things like that. And they had a bunch of health records there and they were stolen, and that affected all their customers, right? Hospitals and clinics. And they all had to file data breach reports, and then they all turned around to sue Blackbot. Well, PFC is exactly the same, but for a larger number of records and a larger number of organizations affected.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at this trend, and it's the bad guys realize that they can go through third parties
Hmm.
that have either some trusted access into the target network, or that they house records or financial data. And then can use that to get to the targets.
Yeah.
So you can make your security posture as good as you want, but you got to watch out for those third parties. We've talked about this in the healthcare breach report as an intentional change of strategy among
Hmm.
the bad guys.
Hmm.
I mean, do you, but, question for you, Mike, do you think that the bad guys aren't directly going after the hospitals here because that's now considered terrorism?
In part, by doing it this way, the gangs not only stay off the radar of the Department of Defense, but they improve the efficiency of their operation. So I hate to say it that way, but it's true. They operate
Yeah,
as a
it's a
business,
business. Yeah.
right? I mean, they look for the most efficient way to steal,
Hmm.
and that's going to a one-stop shop.
Hmm.
It also means they're doing a lot of research into which organization will pay off the most with the least amount of effort. Consistent with what we did in the healthcare breach report. That's consistent with payers and plans being equally targeted now with providers, and that whole shift over to more payers and plans, instead of covered entities like hospitals.
Hmm. Hmm. And you touched on there. These are international criminal gangs,
Hmm.
sometimes aligned with nation states.
Hmm.
Um,
One in particular.
as our friend John Ricci at the AHA refers to the gangs, Russian speaking. So
Russians.
speaking of that, what's happening geopolitically? Not seeing infrastructure being hit. The stories I'm seeing all express surprise that there haven't been Russian hackery
Hmm.
that we
Hackery.
all expected. Yes, you're welcome for that word. That's
Yeah.
it's like you can put it in the dictionary right next to cyber.
Okay.
Hmm.
Um, uh, what was the question? I think they have their hands full right now, but I think they're keeping their powder dry, right? And their hands full because like all their tanks are getting blown up. I mean, they've got something to worry about right there. But there are indications that Russia is developing cyber capabilities against targets in the EU, and this is reported by EU intelligence. There's also indications that they're coming for the elections in our country again. The disinformation is already flowing pretty well, and they're openly talking about it on Russian TV. I, for one, believe them.
So when I was gone, I was in Italy, and one of the things that I have to tell you that was fascinating is churches all, and there are a lot of churches in Italy. Churches all over Italy were flying the Ukraine flag.
Oh, is that right?
Were the Ukraine colors are everywhere,
Mhm.
and I think these articles about Russia being surprised at the European and international response for going after Ukraine, um, uh, you know, maybe has well, it did surprise them, and they've pulled some punches. I think that's one of the things going on here.
I think you
Um,
may be right. I think, when you see that the whole world is lined up against you, you want to be careful not to, do something that's going to, have that blowback.
mhm, mhm. Speaking of countries that have surprised Russia, China.
Hmm.
There's a lot going on with China, and I just read an article about them targeting journalists. A bunch of stories about privacy,
Yeah.
and pretty troubling stuff.
Yeah, privacy is really starting to be more frequently occurring in terms of the stories that show up when I'm, doing the research for the next
Hmm.
day's blast.
Hmm.
Yes, China targets journalists. Yeah, I think all countries target and surveil journalists. Politicians do not like sunlight, or I will say, people in authority do not like sunlight. And I say this after working in state and local government and knowing, how much people don't like FOIA and public records requests. The weird thing about the China story is that they ramped up surveillance right before January 6th. That's what the stories are saying. Now, that could just be a coincidence, but it seems weird.
Yeah. Also, by the way, there are some politicians, there are some people in the power who do like sunlight. I know some of them. It's not
I do too.
universal.
Yeah.
But journalists, and I know a lot of you are on my LinkedIn feed. You should worry about this. You
Yeah.
should attend the security awareness training so you know what not to click on. It may help keep the Chinese government out of your phone. Whether you're in local, national journalism, you know just know they're targeting you.
Yeah. Come to our
Hey,
security awareness training.
yeah. Hey, so what's the deal with the NSO Group? A U.S. defense company was going to buy them, but now they're not. What's happening there?
Yeah, so this actually has everything to do with journalists being surveilled. Okay, so the U.S. defense company is L3 Harris, which thought they had the backing of the intelligence community for this acquisition. They're going to buy NSO Group, which has this product called Pegasus, which is the
Hmm.
zero-click malware that can take over a phone. Blah 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 blah. Right? Which of course the intelligence community was backing this. Yes, we would like the United States to own this tool. Yes, we would.
Sure.
But when the news leaked that this was being considered, the administration, the federal government writ large stepped in and threw the "no way is this going to happen" flag. So L3 Harris backed off immediately, which probably means the NSO group is going to be acquired by some other country, which is also not a good outcome.
Seems like a worse outcome. I mean,
It is worse. Well, depends on who's in power and using that tool now, doesn't it?
what a tangled web we weave.
Hmm.
But I mean, surveillance, seems out of control in the U.S. already.
Yeah.
Does it really matter whether or not the intel community has access to that zero-click malware for taking over phones? I mean, don't they have other ways to do it? Also people give up everything about themselves voluntarily.
Hmm.
Just well, have a good time on Facebook. So I mean, does it really matter?
Yes, it matters. And in fact, I'm actually glad you brought this up because Congress is finally looking at some legislation around the brokered sale of information that is culled from the apps on your phone, your location information for your phone and your car, and other things that can track you like ALPR. They're finally starting to say we need some legislation around this.
Oh, ALPR. Everybody knows what ALPR is. Mike, what's ALPR?
Okay, automated license plate readers, which have, by the
And
way,
and
been
and and people, can you put in the chat? Did you know what ALPR was, or is Mike just using acronyms that? Anyway, go ahead.
okay. I should have just said
Alper, Mike.
if I
Alper.
just said LPR, everybody would have known.
Okay.
They're not automated.
All right.
Okay,
All right. Yeah. Keep
all
going.
right. They have found to be pretty leaky, right? There have been ALPR, it's operated by police departments, and they have had ALPR systems out there with no password authentication, so that anybody can pull data out of it. Anyway, there's these brokers that sell stuff like that. ALPR, you would probably have to acquire it some other way. But ALPR is the topic of conversation because records can identify people that have left a state potentially for a medical procedure. So, with states coming up with bounty programs to enforce what I think are regressive laws, there is now an incentive to abuse those systems. I'm picking my words very carefully here. Anyway, Congress is going to try and take this up and start curtailing the ability of anyone to get information on people's location and movements.
Well, I mean, since it does have that political tinge to it, I'm sure it'll pass Congress really easily, Mike.
Hmm.
No, I mean, because it has that political tinge, there's no way it'll pass Congress. Just my opinion. And anyway, hey, so I do know that after 2 weeks of not being live here, there are probably some threats and vulns you want to talk about.
There are. In fact, I mean, I can only go about 3 or 4 days back before we're out of time. I mean, there's so many things have happened, but there's one more thing I want to talk about real quick. The ex-CIA engineer that was just convicted of what's being called the biggest theft of secrets from that agency ever. This was from a 2017 disclosure of documents by WikiLeaks that detailed how the agency penetrates the networks of foreign governments and terrorists. So apparently, this gentleman had some problems that were obvious to everyone except his handlers at the CIA. He ends up, giving away all this really juicy technical stuff to WikiLeaks, and here we are again.
I mean, it sounds like Ed Snowden and Reality Winner,
Hmm.
although their objectives were arguably more altruistic. I don't. I never know what to think about that.
Yeah.
But this
Eye
guy
of
was
the
basically,
beholder.
this guy was basically out for some type of revenge against the agency, right? All right,
Yeah.
Mike. Threats and vulns.
Okay. Okay. There are a couple of new strains of ransomware. In fact, new strains, new variants are starting to pop up with increasing regularity now. This one is called Lilith. The new tactic is to make stolen records perusable by the public, right? I'm going to steal your records. I'm going to put them online. Everybody can go search for themselves to see if their records were stolen. So there's more urgency to pay the extortion demand, get the stuff off the internet.
Sure.
There's a PayPal phishing kit that's been added to hacked WordPress sites that looks and acts entirely real and harvests PayPal credentials. This is in progress now, so if you're a WordPress operator, get your stuff looked at as soon as possible. There are 70 Lenovo laptop models with vulnerable firmware. And if you're compromised, it's permanent. So Lenovo is distributing new firmware. Get it.
What do you mean it's permanent? Like if you get the new
You'll never get
firmware?
you'll never know if you're
So even if you get the new firmware.
I think it actually resists being upgraded as well. When they say it's permanent, there wasn't a lot of detail there. I might go back to that story and check that out because that's a good question. But when they say once you're compromised, it's forever, I can see how firmware could have a resistance mechanism to updating,
Hmm.
right?
Okay. Yep.
Moving on. Let's see. Microsoft says this is big news. Phishing attack that was able to bypass multi-factor authentication, and 10,000 organizations have been attacked. Right. So this is what happens. You get access to somebody's email system.
Hmm.
You can send email as them, and all of a sudden, business email compromise surges that already exceeds $2 billion a year in losses. So that's coming. Fake Google software updates are spreading malware. Um, and here's my favorite. A new attack impersonates security companies like CrowdStrike and says, you've been compromised, and gives you a number to call. And if you follow through, the support center will have you install malware. It's genius. It's
What?
actually, oh yeah, it's a variant, I think, of the, you have malware on your computer,
Right.
right? That's been pretty standard, except this time they set up a call center and they're emulating security companies other than, say, McAfee or Norton or
Hmm.
whatever. Hey, this is pretty clever.
Hmm. All right. We're just out of time. See, I can't even talk. We're almost out of time here. So kicker, the thing
Yeah,
you
too bad
give
we did
us.
this live.
Too bad we won't have music behind it.
Yes.
All right, leave us with a kicker. What are you going to make us laugh with here?
Well, it's not a laugh. It's
Smile?
after
Anything?
review. My favorite is a Schadenfreude moment. And if you don't know what that is taking pleasure in the discomfort of others, shall we say, for the Chinese government. And it seems that their world famous surveillance program has been collecting data for a long time. And a police station in Shanghai had a searchable database for law enforcement use. Unfortunately, the data were all contained in an elk stack, and they were using passwordless Kibana to access it. And so did other people that now have stolen data on 1 billion Chinese citizens. So let's do a prisoner exchange. You can have your data back on your billion people if we get our Office of Personnel Management data back. Think it'll
It's
work?
a I
We
I
can meet them
I
like at Korean border and would trade CDs or whatever.
I I
No?
I can't believe you just said trade CDs.
Well, it's what do we could stream it, I guess. Put it on Spotify. I mean, what are the options?
I don't know. I don't know. All I can say is I'm glad you're not in charge of prisoner exchanges. All right, everybody.
All
Well,
right.
hey, see you at security awareness training today. Have a great weekend. We appreciate you watching.
Yep.
And Mike, good seeing you.
Yep. Thanks,
Bye, everybody.
everybody. See you later, Jake.